Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. It is the final Q&A of the decade. Wow.
Oh,
Not that we were around for the whole decade, but...
You've really taken the expectations up on this one.
Put the pressure on, haven't I?
Yeah.
Well, final one of 2019, but it is part one. So there'll be a part two and a part three. So technically it's not the final Q&A.
Yep.
I've made this more complicated than it needed to be. Anyway, we answered... Oh, no, you answered. We're going to answer. We asked them a heap of questions on the YouTube community tab.
We asked for your questions, then you asked us questions, and we're going to answer the questions now.
Yep.
Something like that.
Let's go. Let's do it before I get even more confused. Okay, first question here from Brad. What was your favourite Harbour Unboxed video of 2019 to make? So I'm going to let Tim answer that first while I...
You scratch your brain on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I've made so many videos. I think you're on the same boat with this. We make a lot of videos per year, probably over 300 between the two of us per year.
Yep.
So if I did 150 of those, then I don't know. I think the stuff I've enjoyed the most making has been some of the investigations into things like ray tracing and DLSS and the image sharpening stuff. I've really enjoyed diving deep into those sort of things and figuring out where those things work and make sense. So I'm not sure whether I could pinpoint an exact video out of that series that was my favorite to make. I think I've enjoyed making all of those videos. So I think that would be, my most favorite series of videos from 2019. What about you? You had a think at this point?
Yeah, usually my favorite stuff, or the process of creating the video is the benchmarking. I enjoy that the most. So one of the ones that I was really interested as I was making my way through the benchmarking was probably the Core i5 7600K versus Ryzen 5 1600 revisit, because there was some really interesting results there, and it was cool seeing how that played out years down the track, which is, we always talk about how things will perform in a few years' time, so going back and actually getting to do that was an interesting one. So I don't know if overall it was the most interesting video or enjoyable video to make, but as Tim says, there's just so many of them.
And it's definitely the benchmarking and testing that's the most interesting. It's not like all the editing process for our videos is pretty similar from video to video. So it's not like there was one project where I did all sorts of crazy editing tricks or anything. It's definitely all in the testing. So
there's a whole lot. I think same thing with you. And there's no one video that stands out where I just had a blast. I mean, day one reviews are stressful but also fun, like playing with 3rd gen Threadripper for the first time, or even 3rd gen Ryzen, but I think Threadripper in particular was really exciting for me. That was really cool as well. That's certainly up there. Anyway, lots of good memories throughout 2019, working memories.
Yeah, for sure. Where did the Intel shortage come from? Was there an event that kickstarted it? I mean, there was enough supply and then all of a sudden there wasn't anymore. I think it's one of these things, it's always a combination of factors, isn't it? I think Intel was originally planning to have 10 nanometer out at this point. You know, it was planned for several years ago, I think, to have that in full volume production. They struggled. They're only getting 10 nanometer out now. So in that time, they were investing so many resources into building their 10 nanometer production that they weren't increasing 14 nanometer, which meant that when they stuffed up 10 nanometer and they had to produce even more 14 nanometer products than were expected, suddenly there's not enough 14 nanometer manufacturing ready to go. So I think that's the primary reason of where it came from. They just suddenly had to shift a whole bunch of stuff to 14 nanometer and they weren't investing or planning to have to use that as much.
That's right, yeah.
So they suddenly have all these problems with shortages. They've said that they've been investing more in 14 nanometer recently to sort of, bring on more 14 nanometer fabs online, but it definitely hasn't kept up with having... You have 2 or even 3 generations now on 14 nanometer that weren't originally expected to be there. So
and it's difficult from a business perspective, I suppose, because they're investing in something that they're eventually hoping to phase out.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a bit of a juggling act, as Tim says. Like AMD at the moment, with TSMC, they're working across a few different processors. So you've got 7 nanometer in there, you had 12 and 14. It seems like they're trying to shift everything to 12 now, 12 and 7, and then they'll move on. So it's kind of a juggling act as one replaces the other. But Intel was hoping to shift gears, couldn't, and had everything stuck where there wasn't enough capacity. So I'd say that's the main reason.
Yeah, so don't think there was like a single event, but it's just been a slow build-up of issues for them over the years, which is unfortunate for them. It's caused them a lot of strife.
All right, I'm going to pass this one off to my lovely assistant, Tim, because it seems like it's laptop related. Intel currently dominates the laptop and OEM markets. Do you think that Ryzen 4000 could change all that with a new architecture and 8-core APUs? We were talking about this before, actually.
Yeah, I think from a technology perspective, Intel still do have quite a substantial lead, in my opinion, in a lot of the mobile stuff at the moment. Ice Lake and Comet Lake are quite good products. So I think with Ryzen 4000 APUs, that will definitely become much more competitive from an actual hardware perspective, which will make it more attractive for OEMs to use. The question then becomes, do OEMs jump in with this launch, or will they continue to be quite conservative and only have a couple of products using Ryzen products? And it also, I guess, depends on how similar they are to Intel's products, how far ahead they get with 7nm, because theoretically they should be able to get a decent amount ahead with Zen 2 products. So if they're like a lot ahead and they can get quite substantial battery life gains and that sort of thing, then I think there'll be a really strong advantage, like not advantage, but what would you call it, like a incentive for companies to sort of jump on board, because they can make really good laptops that last a long time, have good performance. And they might jump in a bit earlier than otherwise might be expected. But generally, OEMs are very conservative with these things, and it wouldn't surprise me even if they're really good APUs, that they're only used on like a handful of products, like a secondary lineup, or just sort of test the waters. Because like you look at Ryzen Mobile, the testing of the waters there was very limited. There were very few products, and kind of wasn't that impressive in the end. After a few years, kind of petered out a little bit. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how this whole ecosystem evolves and how much traction they get. The interesting thing as well with the OEM market, because that's kind of, there's pre-built desktops as well, and even now you see that a lot of pre-builts are still heavily using Intel CPUs, when Ryzen has been quite a compelling option in desktop for a little while now.
I've spoke to a few retailers and asked them about that, and they say whenever in Australia, so currency different to US, but whenever, I think they were saying about $2,500 to $2,500, whenever making a pre-built that costs in excess of that, it always has to be Intel or it doesn't sell.
Okay.
So that's that mindshare, Intel, the premium brand.
Yeah, especially among people who are buying pre-built as opposed to building yourself.
Exactly. Yep. So Intel's done a lot of marketing over the years, and they've been the dominant force for so long. And they're basically saying, if they make like a Ryzen 9 high-end pre-built, it just doesn't sell anywhere near what a Core i7, Core i9 will. So that's, I think, probably until that changes, that'll be one of the reasons why the OEMs steer clear of mass-producing Ryzen-based systems.
Aren't there like incentives from Intel to,
no doubt,
use, like, you get quite good bulk pricing from like major partners through Intel systems, which I think helps a lot.
I'd say they'd probably help out with advertising budgets for the pre-builts and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, there'd still be question marks over how low can AMD go with their incentives and how much budget they have to push through that stuff, and whether that can match Intel, because Intel's still 10 times the size in terms of revenue.
And Intel is happy to throw around money to move things, where I haven't seen AMD doing as much of that. Obviously, how much money they have available to do it, but Intel seems pretty willing to part with money to make money.
So all those things are going to contribute to it.
Yep. Can we expect to see half-price 3900Xs in 12 to 18 months? I think, what video was that? I think it might have been I think it was the 3950X on the B450 board video. So if you want to find that video, just type in 3950X B450, it'll probably come up. But I gave some examples of like first and second gen parts, how much they depreciated over a 12-month period. Half price, hard to say. I guess a lot of it depends on what Zen 3 brings to the table. If it's a pretty substantial upgrade, or hard to say. But I think it'll based on Ryzen history, it will be substantially cheaper in 12 to 18 months. Half price, hard to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because if you look at the sort of gains that we've seen over the generations, like from Zen 2 from Ryzen 2000, Ryzen 3000 is a pretty substantial upgrade, which you can sort of justify a lot of those older gen parts getting a lot cheaper, and at the same time they're getting much closer in performance to Intel parts, and certainly a lot of the time beating them in terms of, especially now for gaming, it's very close, whereas previously they weren't, and there could be more of a reason to discount those parts. So I think I'd be surprised if we saw a part like the 3900X, which is, you know, very powerful, unlikely to be beaten by Intel's 10th gen parts, especially for productivity. So I think it's unlikely we'll see it half price in 12 months. I think a discount, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's only a small-ish discount. Maybe it come down to $400 and the new 12-core Zen 3 part comes in at $500.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we do, but wouldn't be shocked if we don't. It will be cheaper, that's for sure. But whether it's $100 or $250 off, we'll see. Buy a Navi GPU now or wait until Gen 2.
Well, they haven't. The thing I like to look at when sort of tossing up whether to buy in a GPU generation or not is to see whether they've finished rolling out all the products from that generation or not. And I think at the moment with Navi, we haven't seen all the products yet, with the rumors of RX 5600, for example. So if they're still rolling out GPUs, it tends to be still a fairly new product, and we're not going to be getting the next generation right away. Because it's fairly uncommon that you see like the last product of the previous generation launch and then immediately the next gen product.
Sure.
So I think, considering we're still in the rollout, I think it's still a good time to buy products like that, especially because Navi is very affordable. It's a good buy. So, but if we were more on, say, on the NVIDIA side with sort of super lineup, and like a 2080 Ti example, you never know what's going to come. They've finished that rollout.
It's always one of those questions as well, like buy now or wait. Well, really only you can answer that. Like, is the GPU that you have right now insufficient and you can't enjoy games and you'd like to enjoy them? If that's the case, then probably worth buying now, because I think the options you have now aren't too bad. Whereas how long we end up waiting for. So I would actually keep an eye out for something like an RX 5700 on sale. Like, they've been going for around $300 US. It's a pretty awesome graphics card for $300 US. Good. So I'm using a 5700 XT in my system at the moment for gaming, and I've come down from, I had an RTX 2080 in there previously, had that in there for a few months, and honestly I'm playing around 1440p and don't notice a huge difference. It's pretty good. So I'd probably just get one of those. Okay, this is one that I've been asked a lot. Ever since 3rd Gen Ryzen came out, I'm actually surprised this wasn't more upvoted, but I think people have probably gotten over asking it. So, speculation on B550 motherboard release. I've been saying this, and I'm just going to stick to it. I've been saying this since shortly after 3rd Gen Ryzen was released, largely based on information I've been told by people in the industry. But I think they're going to do what they did with B450, and they're going to release it at Computex 2020, which seems crazy because that's quite a way away, or it was a long way away when I first started saying it. A lot of people were expecting it to happen before now or by year's end, which obviously isn't happening. But I think it'll be a 2020 release, and they'll do a similar thing to what they did with the B450, which is interesting because it's almost not a Zen 2... Well, it's not a Zen 2 product then, is it?
No, but then you think, like, will Zen 3 really require, like, an X670? Or will they just stick with X570?
I think they'll just stick with what they've got.
Yeah, because X570 is a really strong platform. It had a lot of feature additions over X470. And when you look at X470 versus X370, there weren't a whole lot of reasons to do that upgrade. There was a few things here and there. The motherboard quality did improve from gen to gen, but
I'm wondering if it's a situation where they've realized how much of a nightmare and a disaster it is having such broad platform compatibility and just keep throwing new chipsets into the mix. So instead of a chipset or a board release, we get just a BIOS release. Yeah. I think that would go a lot smoother.
And it doesn't stop companies from releasing a refreshed lineup of X570 boards if they want. But I'd agree. I don't think they only need to release those new chipsets when there are crucial new features, especially because like it's supported across all of them. You don't need X670 to support Zen 3 because X570 will. So yeah, if the features are too strong in my opinion. So it just makes sense to have B550 come out in there and have this sort of 500 series carry us through, Zen 2 and Zen 3, and I think that would work really well to get a few more budget options for people and have a nice little upgrade there if you're on B450.
Otherwise, you just end up with like an X370, X470, B350, B450 situation where it's like, what's new here?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a follow-up question to what we were just talking about with B550 here. I know it's been rumoured that the B550 chipset won't support PCIe, but I'm half expecting that it will, even if it is the value choice. To me, it would only make sense since it's going to be released so long after Ryzen 3000 launch. Even if it's just going to be, the M.2 slot and the first x16 slot, there is no point in going backwards, in my opinion. What do you guys think? I would be surprised if it supported PCIe 4.0 because I don't think it's like a really required feature for a lot of users. It's more of a high-end thing that makes sense if you're spending hundreds of dollars on X570. It makes sense to have that as sort of a premium feature for people that are buying, super fast NVMe SSDs that really require that and have multiple storage devices in their system, multiple GPUs. That's really like a high-end thing that can benefit from PCIe, whereas I don't see what the real advantage would be having it from B550, at least for now.
Well, what would be the point of B550 then if it wasn't to incorporate that?
Well, the rumors and leaks seem to suggest that there are additional lanes going to the chipset, so the chipset itself can support more storage devices attached because it improves the link between the CPU and the chipset versus B450. So you do get an advantage there, which would be handy to have like more M.2 slot supports and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
B450 boards are still pretty good, but there would be a bandwidth advantage there. It's just not giving you the full PCIe 4.0. So I think that is where we'd sort of see the advantages. But yeah, I think it could also be quite expensive because that was part of the reason why X570 was so expensive, wasn't it?
That's why B550 could have been delayed so long.
Yeah.
Because, again, speculation, obviously. Don't know. We don't even know when it's coming. But I agree with the sort of the thinking here.
Yep.
So
okay.
Anyway, we'll see what happens.
Is it worth buying an R5 3600 over an R5 2600 with the $70 price difference? This would be for a 1080p 144Hz build with a 5700 or 5700 XT. What do you reckon?
I think probably not. Not short term anyway. I think with the 5700, 5700 XT, if you're playing it 1080p 144Hz, probably not going to be a huge difference in performance there. Depends on, I guess, how aggressively you're chasing those last few frames. But $70 is quite a big difference. It's a tough one, really is. I would probably... I like Zen 2. I probably would lean towards the 3600, even though I've said it's probably not really worth it if you're looking at like a cost per frame type analysis. So I see why so many people agonize over that, because I'd lean towards the third gen part, but I think in terms of value, the second gen part probably makes more sense or is probably better value.
Yep.
All right, question here. I think this one was quite heavily upvoted as well.
Yep.
What's in store for Harbour Unboxed in 2020? I think more of the same, sort of.
Yep.
As uninspiring as that answer is, I think more of what you saw this year. I think hopefully we can step the content up in some ways. We're always looking at ways to improve things. But yeah, I mean, I think this year was a pretty good year. I think we did a pretty good job. Pat ourselves on the back there. I think we did all right. Yeah, you guys seem to think so, from what I can tell.
We don't really plan like a whole bunch of content way in advance. Like we don't plan 3-6 months ahead. It's just whatever comes out, we want to test it. And so whatever's sort of in store for product releases is really going to dictate like 99% of the content that we make. And it's just about, as you say, improving it, making the testing better and more robust, although I think it's pretty good at the moment. We're at a pretty good space, I think. Yeah,
I suppose on the business side of things, we're not really looking to expand yet, which is going to be a challenge for us to sort of take things to the next level. I guess, more of the same. As I said, I would like to build a dedicated studio on site because I'm running out of room in my house and my kids are getting older, so I'm going to have to do something soon. So that's something I'm working on the side. Tim's probably going to look at getting his own place because Tim rents at the moment. So, a few things like that.
I think it's been it felt like a really quick progression from something that we didn't think potentially wasn't going to be viable as sort of a business to now it sort of is viable as a business. So a lot of the things that we'll be doing throughout the next little bit will be just sort of behind the scenes, setting us up so that we can continue to make the content as efficiently as we can and sort of just, working, I guess, in a space where we've realized that this can actually be a job for us. Because I guess we have been doing that for a couple of years, but, it just gets to a point where it's like, well, like your studio space, for example, kind of needs to be improved. It's like, that would have been fine if you were doing it just as a hobby or a side project, but now that's kind of like a really serious thing. You want to improve it and take it to the next level. So, it'll just be a whole bunch of stuff like that.
Yep.
Can you explain why Intel's 10 nanometer could possibly be equal to or better than TSMC's 7 nanometer? Yeah, this is one of those annoying things where there's no like standard naming scheme. It seems like, it does seem a little bit like TSMC and Samsung work with fairly similar naming in that their 7 nanometer technologies are kind of equivalent, but Intel's stuck on a sort of a different naming scheme. So in terms of the actual dimensions of the transistors and things like that for Intel's 10 nanometer is fairly close to TSMC's 7 nanometer. So when you ask how could they possibly be equal to or better than, it's just purely based on the fact that the actual dimensions used are very similar. They're just called different things. As to whether they are better in practice, we really don't know because we don't have a great comparison right now. Intel's 10 nanometers on really low-end parts, AMD's TSMC 7 nanometers on high-end parts, more for desktop and GPU stuff. So
it's so hard to compare like that anyway, because it comes, unless you're trying to manufacture the exact same design and architecture on the same process, you can't really compare them.
Yeah, that's true.
And because Intel's designs, their engineering is top-notch. They're very efficient. I mean, they're on 14 nanometer and they're doing really well. So it's very difficult to compare them. There's no way of making an apples to apples comparison, basically.
Yep.
What is one trend in the tech world that you would want to see either changed, improved, or removed? Wow.
Tough one.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I would like to see happen is every single product, without exception, has an unboxing embargo. Just so I can see Steve Burke get triggered once a month. I mean, who doesn't want to see that? I think all of you would like.
Great.
Unboxing embargo just to trigger Steve and watch his hair slowly fall out. That would be kind of funny. No, I don't want that. I think, it's such a broad thing. I think maybe paper launches.
Yeah, frustrating.
Yeah, like it's really frustrating for everyone. Because obviously we review a product, and if it's really good or we're excited by it, we're like, this is probably something you want to buy. Then you guys want to buy it and you can't, so it's kind of frustrating all around.
Yep.
What else? What else?
I even say something, and this is not going to please everyone, but a trend to fewer leaks. I think it'd be very hard to sort of lock down on that sort of thing, but I think if there were no leaks, my job would be a lot easier. Everyone's job would be easy.
So you just
be
being selfish. I think people would just make, in the absence of any credible leaks, people would just be more inclined to make stories up, I think.
Possibly.
Because people just get, and that's, again, not taking shots at anyone at all, people get so excited about this new tech, and I can certainly understand that. We're in a privileged position where we can sort of sit back and we know we're going to get all the material and the parts to play with, so we don't have to. I guess it takes some of the need to speculate out of it. But I think people would do that anyway. They just seem to get really, because they're passionate about this stuff and that. So, yeah. I mean, having no leaks, so I guess I think maybe accurate leaks or inaccurate leaks.
Yeah, inaccurate leaks. Getting rid of those would be good.
Because something like the 5500 XT, if you have an accurate leak that gives you the price of where it's going to be and not a too good to be true type situation, and you know the performance, it's kind of like, well, that avoids a lot of disappointment.
Yeah, I think as well, though, it's hard to ever know whether a leak is accurate or inaccurate. So you're always going to be sort of going, oh, was that accurate or not? You'll never be able to tell till the information becomes
But I think if
public,
everyone's sort of reporting that and then it turns out to be that, or if it turns out to be good, then that's okay. But it's when, the 5500 XT is going to be $120 and it's going to be as fast as an RX 590. yeah, that's when it would suck. What's the absolute worst product you guys have reviewed, and what product was so good it blew your minds? You got anything for that?
Oh, absolute worst product. It's kind of hard to say because I've been reviewing over a whole bunch of categories. There's definitely been, back when I was reviewing smartphones, there were some really, like, not just bad price, but like actually bad products with like bad hardware, bad software. There's definitely this like original Nokia phone that was Nokia running on Android. It was a shocker. It was terrible.
It also depends, I guess, maybe what the expectation was for the product.
Yeah,
because
that's
if you're reviewing some cheap, crappy little thing that, I don't know, it's just a garbage mouse, for example, but it was $5. It's like that's probably the worst product you've laid hands on. But you know, it's not as bad as a $300 mouse that's also garbage. So it's kind of a hard category to define.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess for me it would be something like what made my worst sort of hardware list of 2019, and one of them would have been, I think probably the absolute worst would have been the Asus TUF RX 5700 XT, just simply because it looks like so many people that purchase that product have major stability issues, or it actually died because the memory just runs so damn hot on that thing. So that was a huge design flaw, and yeah, it's a worst product in the sense that it actually fails.
Yep.
So other things like, I didn't review it, but that Enemax Lictech, I think Steve at Gamers Nexus covered it.
Video on that.
Yeah, I had 2 of those things. They gunked up. So I mean, that's a pretty bad product as well, but I didn't review it. I used it in builds and stuff. Yeah. So yeah, got any particular product or just,
no?
Yeah.
What about the product that was so good that it blew your minds? I mean, you have to go back to like first gen Ryzen. You'd think for, well, I wouldn't say it was so good that it blew your minds, but definitely exceeded expectations.
The thing with first gen Ryzen though was it came on so slowly.
Yeah,
it went from being a massive headache with multiple problems, and we just really couldn't tell if it was going to be good or not. As I said in my original review, it looked like it had potential, but there were just too many problems to recommend it at the time. Yeah. And then by the time first gen Ryzen 5 came along, it was all looking pretty good, pretty rosy. And then it sort of just cruised along with improvements since then. But it didn't blow my mind out of the gate. Probably closer to that would have been third gen Ryzen. Again, third gen Threadripper. I think that probably came the closest to really blowing me away. Seeing how that 32 core processor performed was real, and it was good in games. Like, it had no weakness. So I think that probably blew me away the most this year. But again, it's really expensive. So
yeah, I think as well when you look at on the monitor side, not that this is really a monitor category, but OLED TVs. Once you get a good OLED TV and you see that running up against like LCDs, that really does blow your mind, the picture quality. I think when I upgraded to my LG OLED, I was pretty stunned by the sort of upgrade that you could get over older technology. So I think that's another thing. Again, it's not something I actually reviewed, so it's kind of just something I actually paid money for that really blew me away with how good it was. That'd definitely have to be up there as well.
So we'll hit pause there on the Q&A. So part 1 is done. Part 2 will be on the channel tomorrow, so make sure you check that out. Watch them in the right order. Don't skip one.
It's impossible. We've got serious continuity going on in these. You've got to make sure you watch them in order. Yep.
Do the right thing. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, merch. Somehow we ended up wearing the same sort of t-shirt, which wasn't planned. Normally we like to diversify with the merch placement. But anyway, that happened. And Patreon. You can do Patreon. Part 3 will be the Patreon questions. We just did our live stream, but if you sign up, you can catch the January one next year. We might do that after CES, so there could be some interesting stuff to talk about there.
Yep.
All right, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
We'll see you again next time.